If you're waking up exhausted every single day, forcing your way through thick brain fog and watching your weight climb despite doing everything right, I want you to take a look at this piece of paper. This is a standard blood panel. And if your doctor looked at a sheet of paper just like this and told you, good news, your labs are completely normal, all the while you're waking up feeling like your body is absolutely breaking apart, you're being chemically gaslit. Here's the uncomfortable truth about modern medicine and the standard laboratory reference ranges. They're not actually designed to measure how healthy you are. They're a statistical average designed to measure the absence of acute disease. So if you aren't actively in organ failure, you're stamped as normal and you're shipped home. But matching the average baseline of a chronically fatigued, metabolically broken society is not health. In my integrative medical practice, we don't test for the absence of disease. We test for the presence of peak vitality. Because while you're waiting years for a standard lab test to finally catch up and flag your problem, your tissues are undergoing invisible destructive changes. And your blood sugar could be irreversibly caramelizing your cellular proteins, or your immune system could be quietly attacking your thyroid. So today, we're going to be stripping away the guesswork so that you can actually stop guessing and start knowing. I'm going to walk you through the 5 massive blind spots in standard blood work and give you some of the exact highly sophisticated clinical vocabulary that you're going to need to start to be able to advocate for yourself. So first, let's look at how laboratories create these normal reference ranges in the first place. They're not taking the 100 top healthiest, most vibrant humans on the planet to set this standard. They're taking a statistical average of everyone who walks through that lab over a specific time period. But guess who goes to the labs? It's people who are already sick, tired, or managing a chronic condition. And if you fall into the middle of that population, guess what? You get labeled as normal. So matching the average baseline to a fatigued society, that's just not health. It's delayed diagnosis. We tend to see this in how we monitor your blood sugar. Well, a standard fasting glucose range might look like 90 milligrams per deciliter, and your doctor will say you're not diabetic and move on. But the standard tests rarely ever look at fasting insulin and almost never check for C-peptide. When your pancreas creates insulin, it splits that pro-hormone into insulin and C-peptide. Now, C-peptide lasts in your bloodstream a lot longer because it's far more stable than insulin, and it tells us the absolute truth about your metabolic health. Your body could be pumping out a massive amount of insulin and C-peptide just to force your blood sugar down into that normal range. You could be profoundly insulin resistant for a decade before your standard glucose test even catches it. But what happens when your doctor tests for hemoglobin A1C? Most people view this as a simple 3-month average of blood sugar. But very few understand the actual destructive biochemistry behind that number. When you have excess glucose floating around in your system, it can spontaneously, irreversibly bind to proteins, like hemoglobin inside your red blood cells. Now, this chemical reaction is called glycation. And once glucose glycates a protein, it permanently mutates it into an advanced glycation end product. And we appropriately abbreviate this as an AGE. Now, AGEs are cellular caramelization. And when these crucial proteins become glycated, they structurally warp and completely lose their function. They stiffen your blood vessels and they suffocate tissues. This is the exact biochemical destruction that causes the most devastating microvascular complications when someone has poor blood sugar control, like neuropathy or retinopathy, or even the nephropathy. Another common question I always get asked is, why does the hemoglobin A1C marker only change every 3 to 4 months? Because measuring glycation of your red blood cells is the physiological lifespan of the red blood cell, which is usually about 120 days. Unfortunately, you can't cheat this test with a week of clean eating. But here's the problem. Standard serum tests only tell us what's floating around in our bloodstream. They don't tell us if the vitamin is actually making it inside of your cells. So to validate what's actually happening at a cellular level, we have to look at some functional markers like homocysteine and methylmalonic acid. These are often found on organic acid tests. And if your cellular B12 is low, methylmalonic acid and homocysteine will begin to rise, long before your standard blood tests even flag a deficiency. And if you aren't methylating your vitamins, normal blood levels mean absolutely nothing. If your vitamins look fine on paper, the next place to take a look at in traditional medicine is your master thermostat, which is your thyroid. Conventional labs solely look at TSH, but TSH is a brain hormone, not a thyroid hormone. What I commonly see in clinical practice are results sitting right at the top or the bottom of that normal reference range. Technically, they're inside the line, and it gets marked as normal, and everyone moves on. But these subclinical states are frequently the early, hidden indicators of thyroid autoimmunity, like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, where your immune system is actively attacking your thyroid gland. Furthermore, standard testing completely ignores another marker, reverse T3. Think of reverse T3 as the brake pedal on your metabolism. When reverse T3 climbs, it blocks the active thyroid hormone from doing its job. Elevated reverse T3 is a major clinical indicator of two common things: high systemic stress or a functional selenium deficiency. Without enough selenium, your body lacks the raw materials to allow the T4 to biochemically convert into T3, which is its active form. And this brings us to the fourth blind spot: how your cells breathe and how your body fights. Your doctor might run a standard serum iron test, but serum iron fluctuates by the hour based on what you ate. And to understand your true iron status, you must test for ferritin. Ferritin is the measure of your total iron storage. And you need a robust iron storage because this is what your body will draw from to replace red blood cells. Why does this matter? Because your red blood cells carry oxygen and vital nutrients through your bloodstream to fuel every cell in your body. And if your ferritin is depleted, your cells are suffocating for oxygen, even if standard iron levels look fine. And when it comes to inflammation, basic markers like CRP only show macro levels or the late stage view of inflammation. In our clinic, we look for the C4A. This marker is a highly sensitive inflammatory marker tied to your innate immune system. It acts like a silent, early warning smoke detector, flagging deep systemic inflammation caused by biotoxins, environmental triggers, or chronic immune activation long before a traditional lab test will even register a single problem. But the ultimate illusion in modern diagnostics happens when you try to measure your stress. If a doctor wants to check your stress hormones, they usually run a single, one-off morning draw for cortisol. Cortisol is not a static number. It is a dynamic hormone meant to move in a strict rhythm throughout the day. To get this amazing, real insight into your adrenal health, we have to use a 4-point, at the least, 4-point salivary cortisol test that occurs at specific intervals throughout the day, typically one in the morning, the noon, the afternoon, and the evening. Most people are incredibly surprised what they see here. For instance, you might see an elevated morning cortisol reading and panic and think it's bad or that you're too stressed, while in reality, a sharp spike of the morning cortisol in the morning is called a cortisol awakening response. And this is what gives you the energy to clear out that sleep inertia and get out of bed. I call it the rise and shine spike. Conversely, many people will look at a lower, perfectly flat average cortisol throughout the day and think, oh, my cortisol is low and that must be a good thing. So calm. Absolutely not. A flat, low cortisol curve means that your HPA axis, your brain to adrenal communication system, is completely exhausted. It means that you're in deep burnout and you have zero biological resilience to handle that daily stress. Your body can no longer produce the anti-inflammatory hormone that it needs to keep you healthy. Not to mention that cortisol and melatonin actually oppose one another. So when cortisol is even slightly up in the evening, it can completely disrupt your ability to increase melatonin enough to get that restful night's sleep. So if you're only looking at a single blood test spot in the morning, you miss the entire story of your daily rhythm. So first, if you're tracking metabolic health, fasting glucose is not enough. Demand fasting insulin and C-peptide to catch insulin resistance early. And remember, your hemoglobin A1C is a direct measure of irreversible cellular caramelization. If you don't control those glucose spikes, these toxic agents will continue to damage your microvessels of your nerves, your eyes, and your kidneys over that red blood cells 120-day lifespan. So the second thing is that if you're fighting chronic fatigue, you want to look past the standard B12 and folate tests. Request homocysteine and methylmalonic acid to verify if those vitamins are actually making it into your cells and fueling your metabolic and your methylation pathways. Third, when you're checking for your thyroid, don't only look at TSH in isolation, especially if everything is sitting at those tops or bottom ranges or those extremes. You need a full panel of thyroid antibodies to screen for early Hashimoto's. You want to check for reverse T3 to see if there's any chronic stress or functional selenium deficiencies, putting the brakes on your metabolism, and look at for the T3 and T4 as well. Fourth, we want to stop guessing what your oxygen carrying capacity is on those standard iron tests. We have to check for ferritin. This is a measure of your total iron storage, and it's required to build those red cells so that they can carry that life-giving oxygen to your tissues. And to catch inflammation before it starts, we want to look for that C4A, that complement 4A test. It's an ultimate early warning sign smoke detector for your innate immune system. And finally, reject the one-off cortisol blood draw. Insist on a 4-point salivary cortisol test. This is what you're going to need to verify that you have that healthy rise and shine morning spike to ensure that you're not stuck in that flattened burnout curve. And confirm that your evening cortisol isn't silently blocking your melatonin and wrecking that deep sleep. If you want a personalized health roadmap based on your unique biochemistry and biology, instead of a one-size-fits-all guesswork approach, you have to change what you're measuring. Stop settling for normal when you deserve to feel optimal. The goal of this video is to give you some data and the vocabulary that you need to really take control of your health journey. Bring these to your next doctor's appointment and start asking the deeper questions about your cellular health. In our next video, we're going to be diving deep into the nutrition and hydration pillar. I want to explain the exact biochemistry behind cellular dehydration and why chugging that plain bottle of water might actually be making your afternoon brain fog significantly worse.